I gave my house to my eldest son and lost my family because of it. I didn't give my house away because I was losing my mind. I gave it because I believed I was doing the right thing. At the time, it felt simple, natural, even. The house was old but strong, just like me. It had stood through storms, births, deaths, and decades of life. Every wall had a story. Every creaking floorboard remembered someone's footsteps. It wasn't just bricks and wood. It was ours. And I thought giving it to my eldest son would mean it would always stay ours, a family home. A place where everyone could come back to. I was wrong. I didn't hand it over lightly. I sat with the decision for a long time. I replayed every version of the future in my mind. I told myself it would ease things for the rest of the family. That by giving it now while I was still alive, I'd avoid drama later. No fighting over inheritance. No confusion when I was gone. I thought I was being wise, responsible, fair, and yes, maybe a little traditional too. He was the firstborn. The one I counted on most. The one who used to help fix the gutters, rake the leaves, shovel the walk when my back got too stiff. He had always been around more than the others, and I took that as proof he cared the most. Maybe I confused proximity with loyalty. So when I signed the papers quietly, without fanfare, I truly thought I was securing peace for the years ahead. I believed I was planting roots even deeper into the soil of our family. I never imagined it would be the beginning of a slow, quiet unraveling. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about heartbreak, it's not always loud. Sometimes it creeps in like a draft through a cracked window. You don't notice it until one day you're cold all over, and that's how it started. One missed call. One holiday skipped. One room I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. One sibling who stopped visiting. And eventually, one chair at the table that didn't feel like mine anymore. I don't tell this story because I want pity. I'm not looking for anyone to feel sorry for me. I tell it because I know there's someone out there thinking of doing the same thing, handing over everything they've built in the name of peace, tradition, or trust. And before they do, I hope they hear this. Sometimes the things we give out of love come back to us twisted by someone else's idea of entitlement. And sometimes keeping the family together starts with holding on to more than just memories. Let me tell you what really happened. I've always believed in doing things early, while your hands are still steady and your mind is still sharp. That's how I was raised. Handle your affairs before someone else has to clean up your mess, my father used to say. He died with his will written, debts cleared, and peace made. I admired that. I wanted to leave behind the same sense of order, no fights, no guessing, no bitterness. So when I turned 75, I started thinking seriously about what would happen to the house. I didn't have much else. No big investments. No vacation home. Just that house. But it wasn't just a structure, it was our foundation. It was the place where my children were raised, where we ate Sunday dinners, where my wife and I built a life that felt solid even when we weren't sure of anything else. The house had weight, not just in value, but in memory. I thought a lot about which child to give it to. And yes, the answer came easily. My eldest son. He had always been around more than the others. Helped shovel the driveway when it snowed. Took me to my doctor's appointments. Checked in most regularly. He was responsible, or at least looked the part. Had a family of his own too. I thought this house could serve him well. I figured it would be a comfort to know the place would stay in the family, that the grandkids might even grow up in the same rooms their father once did. I talked to a lawyer, set everything up clean, no secrets, no hidden terms. I even called my other children to explain the plan. Told them, this isn't about love, it's about logic. I'm still here, but I want to put things in place while I can. They said they understood, or at least they pretended to. There were a few long silences, a few awkward replies. One of my daughters sounded disappointed, but didn't argue. My youngest just said, "If that's what you want, Dad." No one pushed back. No one made a scene. At the time, I took their silence as agreement. But now I know better. Sometimes silence is where the hurt begins. I signed the papers and handed the title over. He thanked me, hugged me even. Sighed I was doing the right thing. Said he'd keep the home just the way it was. And for a little while I believed him. It was small things at first. He started changing the curtains, took down my wife's old lace ones, and put up something more modern. The family photos in the hallway were rearranged. A few were taken down completely. I noticed he'd swapped the living room rug with one from his storage. Said mine was too worn out, too dated. I told myself it didn't matter, that the house was his now, and I couldn't expect things to stay frozen in time. But then came the bigger shifts. Suddenly, I had to call before I dropped by. "The kids have schoolwork," he'd say. Or, "We're just having a quiet night in." I was still living nearby, but the home that had been mine for 50 years was no longer a place I could walk into freely. The holidays changed too. Thanksgiving used to be loud and messy, kids on the floor, food everywhere, laughter that bounced off every wall. But that year, 2 of my children didn't come. Said they didn't feel comfortable. Said the house didn't feel like ours anymore. I started noticing the way they talked about things, his house, his rules. There were whispers I wasn't meant to hear. About Dad playing favorites. About how I had handed over everything to one child and expected the rest to smile about it. I tried to explain that it wasn't about favoritism, it was about who could handle the responsibility. But they didn't see it that way. They saw it as a line drawn between them, what I couldn't erase even if I tried. And my eldest son? He changed too, slowly, almost invisibly. He started talking to me differently, less patient, more controlling. When I brought up old repairs or suggestions, he brushed me off. "I've got it, Dad. Don't worry." But his tone wasn't respectful, it was dismissive, like I was a guest, a nuisance, a relic from the past whose opinions no longer mattered. The family I thought I was protecting began to unravel. The very decision I made to keep us close became the wedge that split us apart, and I kept wondering, how did I not see this coming? It hit me one Sunday afternoon. I'd stopped by the house, my house, or what used to be, to drop off a box of old photo albums. I hadn't called ahead. I figured it was fine. I was still family, still the father, still the man who built those walls with his own 2 hands. But when I rang the doorbell, my grandson opened the door and blinked at me like I was the mailman. "Dad's in the back," he said, walking off without another word. I stepped into the entryway and felt it immediately. This wasn't my home anymore. The air was different, the furniture was colder. Even the smell had changed. My son came out of the kitchen with a tense smile. "Hey, you should have called first," he said, not unkindly but not warmly either. "We've got company." I nodded, held up the box, said I'd just drop it off and go. But even as I walked through the hallway, I felt eyes watching me. A pause in the conversation from the living room. Someone I didn't know whispering, "Who's that?" And my son replying, "That's my dad. He used to live here." Used to. That's the phrase that cracked something inside me. Not long after, I stopped visiting unannounced. Then I stopped visiting altogether. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. I didn't want to be the man who lingered too long in someone else's house, even if it was once his own. Eventually, my son offered to let me stay in the guest room after a minor surgery. Just for a few days, he said. I agreed, but the room was cold and impersonal. No photos, no warmth. And when I heard his wife whisper from down the hallway, "How long is he staying again?" I knew I had become an inconvenience, a burden, a temporary visitor in the home I once opened every door in without thinking. It was the loneliest I'd felt in all my years, because it wasn't about the house, not really. It was about being erased from the very place where I once belonged. About being someone's father, and then just being someone they tolerated. And the hardest part of all, I did this to myself. Looking back now, I realize I was trying to buy peace. I thought that by giving early before anyone could argue or lay claim, I could skip the mess I'd seen tear other families apart. I'd watched neighbors' children stop speaking over wills. I'd heard stories at the community center about brothers suing each other, daughters never forgiving their parents. I told myself, that won't be us. I'll get ahead of it. I'll do the right thing. But here's what no one tells you sometimes. Trying to avoid conflict too early only invites it later, in quieter, more dangerous ways. In things that don't get said, in relationships that go cold. I wish I'd talked to my kids more. Not just told them my decision, but asked them what they needed. I wish I had seen the unspoken tension when I handed everything to one child. I wish I hadn't assumed silence meant consent. I also wish I had trusted my own worth more. I thought giving away the house would be a sign of wisdom. But somewhere in the process, I gave away more than bricks and wood. I gave away authority, presence, voice. The moment I transferred that title, I unknowingly changed the way my children saw me. No longer the one at the head of the table, but the one who now had to ask to be invited to it. I don't regret helping my son. I don't regret being generous. But I do regret doing it without boundaries, without structure, and without understanding. How deeply people tie ownership to power. The house didn't ruin my family. What ruined us was assumption, entitlement, and the silence that settled in after I stopped feeling like I had a place in the home I built. So if you're sitting with papers in front of you, thinking you're doing the right thing, pause. Ask the hard questions. Have the uncomfortable talks. Write more than just names, write intentions. Protect yourself, even from those you love most. Because once something is given, it's hard to take back. And once you feel like a guest in your own life, it's hard to feel like you belong again. I sit now in a smaller place. No backyard, no porch swing, no framed photos on the walls of staircases I used to walk up barefoot, holding tiny hands. But I do have peace. Not the peace I hope to create by handing over the house, but a quieter peace, born from hard lessons and the strength to speak them out loud. I've learned that legacy isn't a building. It isn't land or deeds or titles. Legacy is the way you're remembered in your children's voices when they talk about you. It's in how they treat you when you're no longer the one holding the pen. If I could do it again, I'd still be generous, but I'd be wiser. I'd give with clarity, not blind hope. I'd remember that love doesn't require surrender. And that sometimes, holding on to something just a little longer is the best way to protect the people you love from themselves. I know now I still have worth, even if I no longer have that house. I still have stories, still have a voice, still have the right to be seen and heard and respected. And to anyone who's ever felt erased after giving too much, I'll say this: you are not a burden, you are not forgotten. You are more than the roof you built. You are the reason it ever stood in the first place, and that will always be yours to keep.